Terry, welcome to the festival.
Thank you.
You may not be a Hollywood director, but this word visionary, it's a word that they tend to use as shorthand in Hollywood to mean a dangerous lunatic who can't be trusted with budgets. What's your relationship with Hollywood now? I mean, do they trust you at the moment?
Well, I've worked in the last 2 films in Hollywood trying to get them to trust me. And I don't know if I've succeeded or not, but that was one of the reasons for doing Fisher King, was after Munchausen, I was that person you've just described in their minds, a man totally out of control, irresponsible, blah, 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 blah. And so I went out to do Fisher King for, amongst other reasons, because it was a great script and we had a great cast, was to actually put my head in the Hollywood lion's mouth and just show them who I was. And we made the film on budget, it was successful. And they still didn't believe it. And so we've done 12 Monkeys, and it's even more successful, and they still don't believe it, and I can't get the next film off the ground.
So do you want to explain the title of the film and how the hamster factor works?
Well, we couldn't do the gerbil factor, because Richard Gere had done that one. And so we were stuck with another rodent. And I don't know. How many people actually saw the documentary, Keith and Lou's? Oh, that's quite a few, great. So you know what the story is. For those who don't, it's trying to blame me for over budget, over everything, because I get focused on the wrong things. And basically, there's a shot in 12 Monkeys where Bruce is extracting, he's naked in a chair in this very cold and metallic environment, extracting his own blood. And I just wanted to have something quirky in it. And I thought nothing was better than in this extremely dour, mechanical, technological world, was to put a little wheel with a hamster running in it, almost as if the hamster running in the wheel was providing the power for this entire technology. That's what was going on in the back of my visionary brain, as they say, or fucked up brain. But it became obsessive with me. I just wanted to have in this thing something weird and quirky that maybe only 2 or 3 people would spot. But then they would tell their friends, and then they'd go back and rent the film again, or go and see it again, and we get incredibly rich for people trying to spot the hamster.
So what was it like making a film and being under scrutiny? Because this film follows you through every step of the way, from the beginning of the film right through to the test screenings where they're ticking their little boxes. Did you find, you felt like people were breathing down your shoulder?
No, not really, because I mean, it was me that initiated the documentary, because in all the previous films we'd worked on, there were just all these wonderful tales that happened, these disasters, these things that you'd gone through, and one forgets about them. And so in a sense, it was a very selfish diary. But I just wanted people to see, how fallible the process is, how people work, how remove the mystery, and try to see that these are just people working their way through a project. The problems aren't always monumental, they're just small little things. And there's a terrible problem in filmmaking, it's the wearing down process, it's erosion. It just daily, it just pulls something away from you, and you try to remember why you got into this nightmare. And well, the film, I think, shows that.
Yeah. What's it like taking on this sort of star monolith like Bruce Willis, because he's said to be one of the most demanding of Hollywood stars, and he's got his entourage and his army and so forth?
Well, we were lucky because both in the case of Bruce and Brad, they were actors who are stars, let's call them stars, who wanted to prove they were actors. And it was a point in both their careers where they were trying to escape from their own success in a strange way. And Bruce was desperate to prove to the world that he was a serious and really good actor. So he came to us, in a sense, so it puts me in a strong position. And so I was able to say to him, you can't bring the entourage, you can't bring the star vehicles, you can't bring all of that. And I said, you've got to approach this like a monk, you're a man alone, you've got to isolate yourself. And he was allowed his driver and his bodyguard, and that was it, except for the gym, which isn't in the documentary, which is an articulated lorry, half as big as this room. And that was one of the perks that came along. No matter where we moved, there was this thing that took up a city block full of exercising equipment, which he never used. But it was important to show that he could have used it, needed to use it.
I'm sure he was able to use it.
That's right. And it was just a wonderful moment. So what there were moments when we, running around the back streets of Philadelphia, and if you're making a film in London, you'd have a couple trucks, and we'd go and make it, and get the shots. Here was this convoy moving through the streets, so there was no way of escaping. We couldn't. It's quite extraordinary dealing with that aspect of the star system, which is these massive vehicles that have to accompany the stars.
That's to carry the ego, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've got to bring it with you.
When this project was first announced, I mean, it sounded like, someone was having us on, like a big budget version of, or big budget film based on Chris Marker's La Jetée. And you got the script by David and Janet Peoples, but you haven't actually seen the Marker film.
No, I actually went out of my way not to see it because I knew, you get into situations where people would say, well, it's a remake of the film and it's not really very good. The other's a classic and this is a piece of, overinflated nonsense. So I didn't want that problem, so I avoided it. I mean, I'd seen some of the stills and I knew what it was about. But what I was interested in was not La Jetée. I was interested in the script that David and Jan wrote, and they used that as a springboard to make something else. And what was wonderful is Chris Marker was involved in the process, and he didn't want a remake of La Jetée, so it was like everybody was open-eyed about the whole process, and the film became an inspiration for what 12 Monkeys became.
What was his role in it?
He took the money, didn't he? He got paid some money for letting them watch the film and steal all of his best ideas. But that was the important thing. It's because I don't think it's not a remake of the film. I finally saw La Jetée as the accompanying short feature with 12 Monkeys at the Paris premiere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was like there's these two things that are, like one is the acorn. It's perfect. It's small and it's perfectly formed. And the other thing is the oak tree with all the branches splaying out all over the place. And they're both the same thing, but they're totally different.
And you describe it as your 7.5 film. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Oh, Jesus. I know that says it in the documentary. I'm not sure that's right. It may be right. I think I've done only that many films, the half being the opening sequence to Monty Python's Meaning of Life.
Do you still feel you don't want to animate anymore?
No, I don't know. I'm trying, I suppose what I'm trying to do is trying to find a way of making what you can do in animation, that kind of freedom, that kind of extraordinary visual expression in live action. I mean, that was in a sense what Munchausen was about, trying to do, in a sense, like a Walt Disney animated film, but real live action. Since then, I mean, I suppose with 12 Monkeys and with Fisher King, they've been retreating from that, overblown visual style and trying to be more intimate, try to be more character-driven. And that's, when you've got two scripts like that are such brilliant characters, it's quite easy. And it's been much more fun in a way working with actors. They're easier than dealing with all the shenanigans of special effects. And I found I'm not particularly bad at it. It was one of those things that, I mean, when growing up, I always thought, Ingmar Bergman, all these great directors, how they must work with actors. And I could never work out how you did it. And then I discovered what you do is you provide them with you provide a good audience for them. And you laugh when they're funny and you cry when they're sad, and it seems to work. And I think I know what I'm doing. The other thing I learned on Fisher King was to keep my mouth shut. This is the best.
I guess with Robin Williams, you have no choice.
No, but at a certain point, your reputation precedes you. You've done a few films, they think you know what you're doing. So the trick is to go in there and let them think that. And you keep your mouth shut, and you smile, you nod sagely, and they think, he knows what he's doing. And in fact, they're doing all the work. They're having all the ideas. They're doing everything, and it works that way.
I want to ask you to make a massive generalization, but it does seem to me that when animators start making live-action films, whether it's you or Borovchik or the Brothers Quay or whoever, they are nearly always extremely weird. What is it about that transition from sort of flat surfaces to the wide world?
You sit there and you dream and you draw and you go crazy doing it, and you are God. You've got more power doing animation than most things, and so when they make that transition to film, it seems that aspect carries over. Animators always strike me as little people too, with little, mean little. Tim Burton's like that too. We're all kind of little guys who are frightened of the world, and as long as we're animating, we can have some power over it. And then you've got to make that step out into the real world, and And the transition is always odd.
One of the things, as we've just seen in Brazil, that you managed to do in that film was you invented this thing, which is now, as a matter of course, called a Terry Gilliam future. When you did another movie like 12 Monkeys, where you invent the future again, is it difficult to start with something else, or do you end up, you know, do you have that Terry Gilliam future in your mind?
This was really difficult because David and Janet had written in the script a description of a world that was very much like Brazil. It was retro, it was junk gathered together as they went underground, and so it would end up kind of looking like Brazil in that sense. And then Jeff Beecroft, the designer, and the other people working on it all liked Brazil, and so everybody wanted to make Brazil, it seemed to me. And I was desperately trying to stop it, and I don't think I succeeded, frankly. I don't know what else to say.
The scene from Time Bandits we saw earlier, where the glass suddenly shatters, and it was apparently real glass in that shot. And I thought if that film had been made now, or just, you know, from our optic now, I first saw that and I thought, oh, it must be digitals. And obviously the rules of special effects have completely changed in the last 10 years. But is that something you're interested in? Because it seems to be there in 12 Monkeys.
No, I mean, any technology that makes life easier or expands the possibility of what we can do on film, I'm for it. I don't care. But you know, the point is not to dismiss the old ways of doing it. Anyway, so we just literally got a sheet of glass. It was about, I think it's about 8 feet by maybe less, 6 by 4 on a frame. And they all walked into it. And it was wonderful because we got, you know, that thing that when you put your face up against glasses, that worked perfectly. And then when you look the other way, they're all just, you know, miming it, going like that. We had the sound effects later. And it was one of those moments that I thought we came up with a solution that was better than what we'd originally written because of the necessity of the situation. And it's very crude and very simple and very effective. And the problem now is everybody is so, you know, besotted with computer animation that they rush there immediately rather than considering simpler ways of doing it. And I think partly coming from animation, where one thinks of things in very, almost frame by frame, and coming from Python, where we had no money to do, or rather ambitious projects, you learn to do these cheap and nasty and very effective effects.
Yeah. I mean, it's plain to see how obstacles like that can be stimulating, but you seem to have run against more obstacles doing Baron Munchausen than you know, anyone else in the history of cinema. And you say it was like doing The Retreat from Moscow, and it's probably been, you know, just as much documented as that.
That film is about people wanting to do the impossible in Stranger. The sort of the what's the word? Suspension of disbelief on a really big scale. Everybody wanted to make it. Everybody convinced each other we could do it. I mean, I had never worked in Rome. The producer was a very smart, clever guy who said, we can do 30–40% cheaper in Rome. And I could work out roughly, well, we made Brazil for $13.5 million. But we got 23.5. We can do it based on that. So we go to Rome, and really I just wanted to go to Rome, and I wanted to be near where Fellini made movies. I wanted to be in Rome. That's what the real thing behind it all was. But the fact that we could do it cheaper seemed to be a good justification to go there. And then we get into the situation and realize that we can't do it for that money. Now, one thing that's really important that doesn't sort of get told in the story is that the whole thing was written, it was storyboarded, everything there. There were no secrets. It was all laid out. And in those situations, you assume the producer, the completion guarantors, who are the insurance company, are going to look very carefully at all the information, and being financially wise and experienced people will say, you can't do it for that money. But it didn't happen. It actually did happen briefly, because there was an accountant who was first on the job and said, this is going to cost $60 million, and he was fired. And then, and then another accountant came on, and he said, you can do it for $40 million. He was fired. And we literally went through 4 accountants on that film until one said, you can do it for $23.5 million. Righto, and off we went. Then we got into it, and right from the beginning, everything was wrong, and the production was terrible. Even the first week, we had no costumes. Nothing happened. And so when you get into these situations, you either stop and just go home and forget about it, or you continue and you just go. And we continued despite everything. I mean, 6 weeks into the film, a 21-week shoot, a budget of $23.5 million. We're in Spain. The completion guarantors are threatening to sue me for misrepresentation. They're trying to seize all my assets. My wife is pregnant. We're trying to get the house out of my name, and we're shooting a film. And this is what's going on. And and everything is wrong. I know everything is wrong. And we're out there on the 6th week, and we discover all the money's been spent. This is not possible.
All the money?
All the money. Not only all the money, but as the days progressed on that 6th week in Spain, because they had an accountant from Colombia come there, they came in and said, we think we're going to be $2 million over budget. And then the next day, I think we're going to be $4 million over budget. And the next day, we're going to be 6. It went on until we were $10 million over budget by the end of the week, and all the money had been spent. And at that point, they shut the film down. And they threatened to get rid of me and blah, blah, blah. And the Hollywood press just had a field day. And in a strange way, I don't mind it, because there's so many lies about the film, most expensive film ever made. None of these things are true, but I'm quite happy to let that continue, because it was a film about lies and liars. So the more lies, the more interesting. The thing is actually it's perceived to be a far more interesting story than in fact it was, but I'll help it continue.
So every time you tell the story, you double the budget again. Well, it must be very character building. Do you think films like that are going to get made again? You know, films that big which aren't in an obvious genre where someone just picks up an idea and runs with it?
Films get made because of sort of chance circumstances. I mean, it's like, you know, Rennie Harlin made Cutthroat Island. I mean, here's with a company that was dying, and they made a film for an outrageous amount of, because he had made Cliffhanger, which worked. And nobody wanted to say no, even though it was a situation that was clearly out of control. And so you get into those things. Waterworld was one of those situations. Kevin Costner didn't even want to do the film, but he got in there because, in fact, he was going to do another film. If he did Waterworld for them, they would do another film for him. And it was a situation that everybody got into, and nobody would get out, and it goes out of control, and they will continue to happen, because it's surprising how, I think, stupid Hollywood is. It doesn't work on facts. It doesn't know what this director is good at. It doesn't know what that actor is skilled at. It only is what is possible at that moment. This actor's hot, that director's hot, that script has been floating around for 5 years, we've invested a lot of money in it, we can make it happen. And that's, I think more films get made that way than not.
So you went from that sobering experience to The Fisher King, which came as quite a surprise, because it was almost like your chamber piece.
Yes. I felt delicate. It was exactly that, because after Munchausen, I said, I want to make a really small film. I was going to make a film about a schizophrenic, but only one half of his personality. And that's where it started.
You only had the budget.
Yeah, and that's where we started. And I was trying to get other things going, and I mean, frankly, I'd lost it. I couldn't actually write. I couldn't do anything. I had lost total confidence after that. I was like burnt out. And this script arrived, and actually it arrived with another script that they really were keen for me to do. And I'd been built up for it for about 3 months, and it was The Addams Family. And I read it and said, this is a joke. But it went on to make a lot of money. And this other script was there, and you just started reading it, and it was fantastic, because it was like I knew the characters. The reason that came about wasn't that, oh, we must have Terry Gilliam to do this film. It was because they had Robin, and they needed a director that Robin would work with. And all the other directors were working. They all had films. And they eventually get down to this, oh, Gilliam, he did something with Robin once, you know, let's try him.
And how manageable is Robin Williams? Because he's always represented as sort of uncontrollable isotope that directors just have to kind of let go and sort of shooting bits off in every direction.
I mean, that's all there, but we'd sort of done a deal that we would stick to the script, but at a certain point you could see the pressure building up, and Robin would have to have a go at it. And so, you know, take 6, suddenly he would, okay, do it. And he'd go, and there'd always be 1 or 2 good things in that. And so, okay, let's keep that. And we use it, incorporate it, and carry on. But most of the time, he worked very hard at trying to control himself. The problem is, Robin is such a sweet and, you know, genuinely nice and decent man. He's getting paid $6 million and felt he's got to do something for that money. And I said, you don't have to do anything, Robin, just be. But he had to think of lines, he had to do this. I said, no, just... And that was one of the reasons I cast Jeff, because I knew Jeff would anchor it. Because my fear is that Robin would start me laughing, and I would encourage him. We'd encourage each other, and the whole thing would just inflate and go out of control. And Jeff was like our anchor. He was the one thing that wouldn't be, you know, transported by that. And I think it worked really well.
So, are you in a position now where you can start, you know, looking for things?
The future.
You know, well, you know, start putting your nightmares on screen.
It's strange. The problem is there's so many projects out there that one could just do, that they're happy to hand over the money and I could do it. But it isn't that they're bad. In fact, there's some really wonderful scripts. But I have this obsession about there's certain things I can do that nobody else does, that nobody thinks that way. Nobody can do those images that way. And I just want to get them on the screen. That seems to be my function rather than just doing a good, solid job directing, something that 10 other directors could do equally, if not better.
You're partly responsible for the Tarantino phenomenon because you were kind of his mentor at Sundance.
I mean, it's a nice thing to think. It's not.
Well, someone's got to take the blame.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it isn't quite true, but it's an interesting thing the way it happened because it's Sundance, which is. Sundance is a very interesting place because they're up in these beautiful mountains of Idaho, and people with ideas for scripts and films, they get to come and try them, and then professionals get to come and feel better because they're more experienced and talented than these kids coming up, and that's why we go. And the writing is great, basically, is what I did most of the time, and so. Quentin was there, and I won't name names. One of them is a British director who really shat all over the Reservoir Dogs. And he was very depressed because this previous group of professionals didn't like it, and I don't think they liked him. And then the group I was with came, and the group I was with was quite extraordinary. It was Stanley Donen, who directed Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Singing in the Rain, and Volker Schlondorf, and myself, which is a really strange group, but in fact, we got on like a house of fire. It was great. And we thought Quentin was wonderful. We thought the script was extraordinary. And all we did was, we were nice to him, so we can't take too much of the blame. But we were nicer than the other guys. That's all I know.
Let's have a heated debate, as they say. And would you like to fire some questions? How would you like your films to be remembered?
As they were made, I suppose. I'd just like them to be remembered. That's enough.
Any advice for an animator who wants to become a director?
I think if you can join a comedy group called Monty Python and become successful on television, that's the way to go. I don't know. I mean, I really am absolutely useless with advice about how anybody should proceed to have a career in films, because I don't know. Mine was so bizarre the way it happened. It doesn't relate to anybody else's, and I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can say is persevere. You just have to have patience and persevere, and you probably won't make it. But,
do you have sulks and fits and rages on set? Because there's a scene in The Hamster Factor where you mysteriously disappear into your trailer for an hour.
Not many. The rotten documentarians caught the only moment where I thought I behaved badly. And of course, they blew it up way out of proportion. No, I don't know. I can't tell. I'm a very bad judge. That's what's interesting watching that documentary, to see why would anybody listen to this man? You watch it, like, Jesus, a miserable sod, can't communicate, can't articulate, and they give him all this money. Something is wrong with the world.